Up to this point, we have been creating our corridor models using a single assembly that's being swept from one end of the alignment to the other. Now, unfortunately, we can't build all corridors that way. In some cases, you'll need multiple assemblies to build your corridor model because your typical section may change throughout the design. Let's simulate that here. Let's take a look at the assembly first. Let me come over here. Here I've got a couple of Florida DOT lanes. I've changed the pavement thicknesses. We'll make the assumption that this assembly represents kind of a road reconstruction, maybe not necessarily a full depth pavement replacement. Right now I'm running that assembly the full length of my alignment, but when I get to this area, I want to do a widening on both sides. I'd like to include these outside lanes. I'd like them to be at -3%, whereas the lane slopes here are at 2. And I would like this to be, we'll say, full depth reconstruction, so we'll actually change our pavement thickness through this area. And then when the widening ends, we're going to go back to our current assembly setup here. So I need to have a different typical section applied in this area. Let's do that. I'm going to zoom in on the assembly, and to do this I'm going to create a copy of this one. No sense reinventing the wheel. Most of the work's done for me here. I'm going to launch the copy command, and I'll select the assembly object and I'll press enter. I'll just pick this up from a point on screen. I'll create a copy up above. I'll press escape, and then I'll give this copy a new name. I will call this full depth widening area. I'll press escape. I will then select these two lanes and I will adjust their pavement thickness. So inch and a half for pavement depth 2. Let's make the base depth 6 inches and sub base will be 4 inches. Next, I'd like to include the additional outer lanes because I want those to be at a different slope. So let's select the assembly. We'll go to the tool palette and then I'll choose FDOT lane. I'm going to choose insert and I'll insert one of these after. I'll press enter. Still in the command. I'll insert one after this lane on the left. I'll press escape, and then we'll adjust the properties of both of these lanes. I'll select them. We'll do the pavement thicknesses first. 1.5, 1.5, 6, and 4. Let's change the slope to -3%. That looks good. I think these have logical names on them. There we go, right lane. So when I copied this up, it maintained the naming. I'm going to give these new lanes logical names. We'll call this right lane outside, and I will call this one left lane outside, just to make things easier with the targeting. Okay, let's pan this over. Now that I have my two sections, let's apply those to the corridor model. What I'm going to do is split my corridor. I'm going to split it here at the beginning and at the end. This will give me 3 regions, and then I can assign my typical section or the appropriate section to each region. I'll start by selecting the corridor. I'll come up to corridor properties, and here on the parameters tab, here's our baseline. Here's the region that we have currently. If I select that, you can see that's highlighted. That's the area where the typical section assembly is being swept along. Full length, this thing going, of the alignment. I am going to right click on this region, and I will come down. I apologize, this is off the screen. I'll come down and choose split region. This will take me into the drawing, and now I have a jig at my cursor here. I would like to split the region at the end point of this polyline. You can see a new region is created at that station. Let's pan this over. I'm still in the command, and I'll grab the end point. We'll get it down here so it's easier to see. The end point of the polyline here. That just added another new region, and I'll press enter when finished. This takes me back to my corridor properties, so now I have 3 regions. It's this one in the middle that I want to assign a different assembly. I'm going to choose full depth widening area. Let's click OK. And then for right now, let's just go ahead and click OK. We'll rebuild the corridor. We'll take a look. All right, not bad. I need to adjust the targets. Okay, you can see I transitioned, it stopped the one here, and then it kind of started the other one, but the feature lines are jumping to the next insertion, and then it gets to the end here and it stops, and then it's kind of jumping down to the next insertion there. Let's take care of our targets now. I'm going to select my corridor. I'll go to corridor properties. Now, I don't want to set the targets for everybody. You can see that's a nice option if I want to do one that's going to apply to the entire corridor length. But if I want to adjust targets for a particular region, say this region, I'm going to come down. You can see there's a target option here, a target column. I'm going to click the ellipsis button, and now I'm adjusting the targets for this region only. Let's take the left lane outside. I'll click the horizontal target. I would like to select an object from the drawing. For the left side, I'm going to choose this polyline, and I'll press enter. That's the only one necessary. I'll click OK, and then we'll find the right lane outside. We will select that from the drawing. I'll select this one, and I'll press enter. I'll click OK, OK. Let's click OK. We'll rebuild. There we go. That looks good. Let's take a look at this in the section editor. I am going to select my corridor, and then I'll bring up the section editor, and then we will step through this. So here's my kind of like my resurfacing, and then when I get to the widening, now I've got the full depth pavement, and you can see those outside lanes are opening up at 3%, and that carries through until we transition back to the normal width. Let's do one more thing. I'm going to close this. I'll press escape. Since I have multiple regions, I can assign different assembly insertion frequencies for each region. And you saw that my transition there occurred just over, two assembly insertions, same as this side. What if I wanted to tighten this up through this area? I'm going to select the corridor. Nope, looks like we have to select it from the Prospector tab. I'm just going to open up Corridors. I'll just right click on Main Street and choose Select. I'll go to Corridor Properties. There we go. So for this middle region, notice there's a frequency column here. Let me click the ellipsis button. Here's where I can adjust the frequency for this region only. So along tangents or straight segments, which is what this is, the geometry straight, let's knock this down to 5 feet. I'll press enter just so we can see the difference. I'll click OK, OK, rebuild. There we go. So this shows us that we can tighten up and change the insertion, the amount of assembly insertions in any area of our corridor just by creating a region. Let me press escape. I'm going to select the corridor again, and I'm selecting it from an assembly insertion. If you do that and you go to the section editor, you will actually be starting at that location. So let me go to next, next, next. Here's where the widening starts. We can see that pulling out till we get to the full width, and then we can maintain that all the way through, and then eventually we'll hit the area where we take and transition that back down to the normal width, and then we go back to our original pavement section. Let me close this. I'll press escape, and we'll return to model space. So in this session we learned that we do not have to use a single assembly for the entire corridor model. We can use multiple typical sections if that helps us. We also saw that by splitting the corridor into regions, we have more granular control over the targets in each region and the frequency.